Please be seated. First, I want to thank you and Mother Jenny for inviting me to come and spend this time with you. I've been looking forward to it ever since she asked. And I'm going to speak with you a little about Revelation. Then I am going to be telling you about the time, among many, where Jesus was real to me, that signifies that the resurrection is real and here in new life, in spring, and in all those ways that Jesus touches us. But you may be wondering how a retired Presbyterian pastor came to worship here at Iona Hope. Well, often retired pastors will come to another church so they don't interfere with the new pastor. So my husband and I walked in on Easter, were greeted just so wonderfully, and I was invited to do the Lectio Divina, which I'll tell you a little bit more later, and we just felt so at home. We picked the Episcopal Church because my husband had moved from going to the Presbyterian Church to the Episcopal Church. They would alternate Sundays. I've been coming to Saturday church, by the way, and you may not know me, but I'm thrilled to be. I've been to 9:30 too. So my grandmother was Episcopalian, and she would take us with her to church, and also when she was with the Altar Guild. She would come and place the linens and do all of those things, and she would genuflect before. And it made such an impression on me that she had that reverence for the altar, the reverence for the cross, all those indicia to her that meant Jesus Christ. So we looked for an Episcopal church and found Iona Hope, and it was the only one we tried, and we've loved it ever since. The reading this morning from Revelation is interesting. You know, Revelation, there must be as many interpretations as they are people in the world. Last week we read chapter 7, and now we skip 14 chapters later. Well, one of the many things they skipped was all the kind of different, maybe even scary parts about the 4 horsemen, the dragon, the pouring out of the bowls, the brimstone. Many preachers are very excited that that wasn't included in the lectionary. So I'd like to highlight this particular portion. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them as their God. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." One translation says that this part about dwelling with us and being, apparently I'm a little nervous. We'll just take a quick breath. Not that you're scary. Y'all are really great. Okay. So, one translation says that God not only dwells, but moves into the neighborhood. Can you imagine seeing Jesus on the corner, seeing him in Starbucks, seeing him mow the lawn? What a pleasure that would be to see him in that way, to have him real and as much a man as he is God. haven't done this before. I'm just blanking up here. One of the problems with preaching without notes is that this happens to you sometimes. Okay. The next translation talks about God moving into a tent, not just the neighborhood, but a tent. When I was 67, which wasn't that long ago, I went camping for the very first time. No childhood camping, no RV camping. And my friends said, come, we'll go to Highland Hammock State Park, we'll pitch a tent, and there we will be with each other. Well, tents, of course, are different than they were in first century Israel, but there's some things that are still similar. Tents are often placed on a campsite, one where you're in close proximity to everyone. And I learned lots of things about my campmates. I know that Sabina snores. I know that Susan sings in the shower. And I know that Mary likes to talk to herself a lot. So that gave me a little clue into what the intimacy might be like to be there with Jesus, to have that close relationship. So he does dwell in us now, just like he dwelled on earth with the disciples. And Jesus says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. God is the beginning and the end. It's something for me that's hard to wrap my head around, the beginning and the end at the same time. But that, I think, is one of the mysteries. And there are a lot of mysteries about God that we don't quite understand. But God is at the beginning and the end. God is a God of history, a God who was with the Israelites as they traveled through the wilderness. God provided that cloud and the pillar of fire to show them the way. God was there in Jesus Christ, and God is still there with us today. Let me tell you about that time that Jesus was real to me. It started out, my husband and I were sitting during Hurricane Ian and watching the water come in and get higher and higher. And we started this chorus of, shall we stay or shall we go? We started talking about places we might move to. And then has had happened all 25 years that we've been here. After every hurricane, I say the next one I'm leaving. Well, we said that, and there we were again. We stayed. And then we had Helen. You do the usual things. You pack up, you get your food in case you have problems, the hurricane kit with all the important papers and all of that. And we went to a hotel near 75. And that worked. That was fine. Typical hurricane, we're all right. Then Milton came along. I have a friend who says, I can't remember which one did which. I just call them Hilton. Well, Milton did do something for us this time. He put water into our basement. Didn't go in the house, but I had not expected that. I didn't think the surge predictions were going to be enough to come into the house or the garage. So I hadn't done the preparations to put everything up. So we ended up throwing away things, some wood, a lamp, and those things that you keep in the garage, some luggage. And then it came time, just a little time passed, for me to invite my friends from the Lectio Divina group to come to my house. Well, if you're not familiar with Lectio Divina, I invite you to come and join us. That was the first way that I made really intimate church friends. It's a way of reading scripture and other material, and we have a good time. It's very prayerful, and ask me afterwards and I'll tell you. It meets Monday at 4:30. So here we are, inviting my friends, and I'm looking around getting ready. There's 6 of us, and I go out to the garage to find the table leaf, the thing you put in the middle that makes the table larger. I couldn't find it. So I had to have my friends on the foretop, and we were kind of standing around each other, and I snapped. I don't know why. It was no mas. I can't do this anymore. Hurricane killed my table leaf. Most women I tell this to understand it, and if the guys don't, find one of us, we'll explain it to you. And my husband wasn't quite so sure. I said, we're leaving. I cannot do this anymore. And he said, okay. And we began to make some preparations, continuing the shall we stay or shall we go? And so we began to think about my hometown, Huntsville, Alabama, the rocket city. They used to test the Saturn V rocket when I was little, and the whole house would shake, the china would rattle. It's a great place to grow up. So I called my friend, the real estate agent, and I said, let's talk about at least thinking through what it would be like to sell our house. And she came one day, but before she came, we had always said, if we can do a water barrier, we'll stay. If we can, so we started researching water barriers. Are they expensive? Do they work? Are they easy to pick up and put down? We hadn't found anything. And then the night before the agent was supposed to come on Tuesday, one of my friend's fathers had a business working with water barriers. They were from Italy. They were relatively inexpensive, and they were easy to put up and put down. And so I texted my friend and I said, I don't know what we're going to do. We've always said we were going to do this, and we're really torn. We love this house. After Ian, we were able to remodel and do some things with it. It was made for us. We'd had the chance to make it the way we wanted. And my friend wrote back and said, I know that you're conflicted, but I'll just come in the morning and we'll see how we are. And we thought through the question, shall we stay or shall we go? And we prayed about it. And that morning, about an hour before she came, Scott and I looked at each other and said, let's continue on this journey of shall we stay and shall we go? So we agreed to list the house with her. We figured we didn't necessarily have to take an offer, but we would list the place, because if we didn't start, it was going to be on the market when hurricane season came up. So we have reservations on Delta to go to Huntsville the next day. We get on the plane, we touch down at the airport, the new travel agency from Huntsville meets us, and we went and look at houses. We do that for 2 or 3 days. We find one that we liked, and I really liked it. And so that part was going pretty okay. We spent time with my sister out on her beautiful deck overlooking Gunnersville Lake from the Tennessee River. Spent time with her, her husband, and my nephew. And we were able to meet up with Scott's brother and his wife and their daughter. I had not seen Rebecca from when she came to our wedding 30 years ago. And she has 3 wonderful boys that, of course, I'd never met, 7 to baby. And John and Lori were there. I had not seen them since Scott's father died. They were both just lovely occurrences. I was a little hesitant about meeting what in essence for me was new people, but it was just as comfortable as you might imagine. Well, Sunday rolls around, and we're going, it had snowed right before Sunday, so my concerns about the weather were pretty much satisfied because we lived through the snow. Now, snow in Alabama is kind of like this, but still it feels cold and you can't do anything. So I start looking at churches. There's the church I grew up in that has great memories for me. Another church where I performed Godspell with my youth group. But something just seemed right about going to First Presbyterian downtown. So we drive that morning, and we're running late. And we get there, and the GPS isn't being very helpful. We drive around downtown, and there are like 4 big churches. We drive past the Methodist church. We drive past the Episcopal church. We can't find the Presbyterian church. So we drive around for a few more times, and we realize that church has started, and it's downtown. And I think we'll never find a parking place. Right in front of the church was a parking place. We rush into the church, grab a seat in the middle of the back row, going, excuse me. And the preacher preached from calling the disciples. And that was especially important to me because I was going to ordain elders in 2 weeks. Elders in the Presbyterian Church are sort of like the vestry or board of directors. They are ordained and elected to become the officers for their church. They take vows to support the church, to love God, and to do things with creativity, imagination, and love. One of the things about ordination of elders is the laying on of hands, like you do at the healing. Everyone is invited to come up. Anyone who's been ordained. So anyone who's ever been a deacon or an elder, anywhere, anytime, any pastor, retired pastors, so they come up and they put their hands on that person, and it continues on. There's so many people that no one can touch them directly, so they touch the next person, and they touch the next person. And it comes out in this fluid, moving, loving thing that reminds me of all the saints of the church. And it's always been special to me. I think it's because of the community, the thought that Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega, and we are there with those saints and everyone there in that church and everything in between. So I get up, and I know I'm in the middle, so I get up and I say, excuse me. And there's a man on the very end, and he has a cane. And he said to me, I wish I could go up there. And this still small voice, the Emmanuel, the Alpha and the Omega, told me what to do. And I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, let you and I go from here. And I got that same feeling. And he looked at me and said, I feel like I was up there. And I said, I do too. And I looked at my husband, and he looked back at me, and we knew that our question had been answered by Jesus, and we were home. Amen.